you guys only knew what I do to hype myself up to film a video when my brain says no. Bonjour. I'm recording. Terrifying in here, not fit for public consumption. Who be kidding, I've probably showed you anyway because there's no secrets between you and me. Well, except for what I did in April. And welcome back to a new video. It's like I was warding you off there. Don't come too close. Don't poke them there right on the edge. I'm only kidding. Come into the light. Join me. Pull up a chair. Bring a beverage. Bring me a beverage. Mine's a tea with any plant milk you like. Except for coconut, unless you're trying to kill me. How the devil are you? How was your April? How did your reading go? Mine was good. We read a lot of books. The quality was variable. But now I've run out. Because for the first time in... Actually, I choose not to do the maths because that will probably be infinitely more triggering. I have no books on the go. I am reading nothing. Zero. Zip zilch. That is a very odd feeling for me because although, as we have previously discussed, I do tend to finish books at the end of the month, like bam 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 bam, and have the joy of kind of watching the numbers stack up. In April, I kind of started and finished all of my books in a very leisurely manner. And I got to the last day of the month and I was like, because somehow, quite accidentally, all of the planets had aligned and I finished every single thing that I was reading. No carryovers, nothing I'd even stuck a bookmark in. And let me tell you, my friends, that much like the writer's blank page, that was a little bit terrifying for me coming into May. Turns out in my old booktube age, I like the comfort of a few books that I've already started. Because making a list from scratch made me confront myself in ways that I don't like. Personal growth sucks, which is actually a pretty good place to start this video. This video, which is, because I don't think I've said it before so far, my May TBR. And instead of starting with the books, I'm going to start with just a little update on me, moi, and how I am, because it's been a little bitty quiet around here for the last couple of weeks. And that, my friends, is because I very much like the quality of the books that I read in April have been a little bit variable. Now, I know that almost all of us use booktube as a form of escapism, and I completely advocate that. I think carving out as many safe places for your brain as you can on the internet is a really good thing. And so I'm going to try my best to not burst that bubble of calm when I say that one of the reasons that I've been a little bit absent is because things around the world have just been a little bit heavy right now. It's been a very difficult and a very stressful couple of years to be part of the queer community, and particularly this last 6 months has been quite scary. And as for the inopportune timing, which seems to be a theme that I have in my life, it has been a very, very strange time to come out as non-binary and to change my pronouns. The name change stuff, interestingly enough, has been overwhelmingly lovely. Opinions are kind of like Star Trek companion novels. Everybody has one, and some of those are also very, very variable. Interesting standards all round. But one of the other interesting things that has happened to me over this period is that I have come to have a little bit of an adversarial relationship with the camera. Now, I've been doing this a long time, and of course there are going to be times where you're less secure watching yourself talk. Recording yourself in an empty room and then scrutinising your face for several hours on end to produce an end product is inherently a very strange experience, and it's kind of more contact than anybody needs with themselves close up and sometimes in HD. For the most part over the years, apart from those little periods, I've been pretty okay with it. But over the last 6 months since changing my name and coming out, I have been on a real journey to kind of find my look again. There's been a lot of just like staring into the void of my wardrobe and trying to find the pieces that make me feel dysphoric versus the pieces that make me feel joyful, and then trying to sort of build back a wardrobe and a look based on those things. And while I finally feel like I'm getting there now, there were definitely a couple of ropey weeks, because as much as finding a look that feels true and authentic to myself now is giving me deep amounts of glee. It's so exciting and so rewarding. There is also a huge amount of grief in the process, going through old pieces that I loved at one time that made me feel so good that now make me feel awful and I never want to wear again, and trying to like rehome them in an ethical way and not look back at past pictures of myself or videos or whatever and not like what I see. In short, I've kind of been going through this big process where I'm trying to honour where I am right now whilst not also devaluing all of the previous versions of me that I've put out into the world. And if you're sitting there thinking, ooh, all of that sounds really deep and heavy, then yeah, you've hit the nail on the head, and that's where I've been for the past umpteen weeks. But like I said, I am finally in a place now where I'm coming to terms with a lot of stuff and where sitting down and looking at the camera doesn't make me feel ugh. Which is good for both of us because it means that I actually get to be here and do the things that I want to do, and you get to watch a better version of me that is more well-rounded and more settled in their skin. It is at this point all win-win. Although I have a very like quick and volley-worthy sense of humour, I somehow did not take into account the amount of puns that could have been made out of my name when I changed it. And I'm not gonna lie, one of the best parts about doing it has been watching you guys come up with all of the ways that you can make it funny. It has, to not put too fine a point on it, been keeping me going these last couple of weeks. Alright, so big existential life updatey stuff aside, let's talk about the reading plans. You guys will probably notice that I did not put out a TBR for April, and that is because for the month of April my patrons chose what I read for me, which was genuinely the best plan, because when I started to put together a list for April I kept getting overwhelmed. I don't know how many times at this point I had watched back my bingo board update video and kind of started micro-analysing the numbers on it, and I just could not make a decision. And I mean, let's be honest, when it comes to existing with ADHD, decision paralysis is one of the things that I get the most when I am the most overwhelmed. I should have taken that as a hint that I was a little bit burned out on life in general, and I really do mean it when I say life in general, because once my patrons started picking books for me, my reading mojo returned in no time. And like I said, April's reading month was kind of good. Just before I tell you about any of the books that I've picked for myself for May, I first want to give you an update about the Fits Along, because as a knock-on effect from not wanting to see myself on camera, not wanting to show up in public on live shows has also been a thing. And that has unfortunately left a few of you guys wondering where we should be in the Fits Along or what's going to happen next. And so I'm here to tell you simply that nothing has changed with the Fits Along's reading order. Here is the current dates, and as always they are linked below down in my description box, along with a downloadable of this graphic that you can grab for yourself, which means that May to June's book is The Golden Fool. Most of you have just kept on reading even though the last two live shows haven't happened, which is exactly what I hoped for. And our next live show will just be a bit of a bumper edition where we wrap up what we thought about the last of the Live Ship Traders trilogy and the first book in this trilogy. And then we will be back on track, so keep all of those thoughts that you've saved up and bring them to the live show, the date of which I will announce in the next couple of weeks. Alright, so that does bring us swiftly back to our May TBR. I'm a scoochel over here just a little bit. So as I've said, May to June's book for the Fits Along is The Golden Fool, but I am in fact one book behind. I have not in fact yet read Fool's Errand. So I will be reading both of these chunkers in May. Thankfully, now that the Live Ship Traders series is finished, I can quite happily go back to the audiobooks. In my not so humble opinion, the narrator for the Fits audiobooks is absolutely amazing, and I would quite happily listen to him read hundreds of books, except for now his voice is Fits in my mind. So actually technically I don't want him to read anything else ever again because he is only Fits. And so I will be moving back to the audiobooks for this trilogy, which will mean that I can listen to them when I'm doing other things, which means that my eyeball reading time can go to the other books on this list because they're are quite a few of them. So as if those two extremely large books weren't enough, the next absolute doorstop of a tome was gifted to me from my patrons. It was the last book that they picked for me for April. I genuinely did not think that it would win the poll. I did blind emoji polls for it, and when I put together the emojis for this one I was like, surely not. No, this is the one that won. That book is The Witching Hour by Anne Rice, which is the first book in the Mayfair Witches trilogy, the first book of which is just under 1,000 pages. The second book I think comes in around 900, and then the next book along I think is like at the 500 to 600 page mark, which I absolutely love for me right now. I have an interesting relationship with reading Anne Rice's work way back in the day when I was visiting the library far earlier than I should have. I'm talking about the days where I was discovering murder mysteries and thrillers and also urban fantasy. Definitely a selection of books that, though my reading abilities were very ready for, my reading comprehension was perhaps not ready for. Like, I was a smart kid and I got all of the concepts, but some of that material I probably shouldn't have been reading for a few more years at least. Which explains a lot about me as a person now and my preferences, right? This is the person who watches The Conjuring as a comfort movie and reads true crime to relax. Way back then, one of the first books I actually borrowed off of the Anne Rice display that my library had was actually The Feast of All Saints, which is not in any way supernatural or spooky at all really, and is actually a deeply queer look at the black community in New Orleans, which now looking back on it I'm like, I don't know particularly what drew me to that book first. It might have been this very 90s cover, but whatever it was, I became absolutely obsessed with Anne Rice. I read almost all of the Vampire Chronicles books. I stopped reading on either Blackwood Farm or Blood Canticle, I can't remember which one, and those are books 9 and 10 of what I think is a 13 book series, so I read a lot. And although Interview with a Vampire I reread not that long ago and it still absolutely stands up, I remember even at the time thinking some of these books have some incredibly ropey portions. I mean, I distinctly remember there being like a 20-page scene wherein Lestat just kind of talks about what an old lady who he has killed and is eating tastes like. Way back then as a kid I was much less proficient at finding books in the right order, and so I have dipped into 2 books in the Mayfair Witches series and I don't know which one came first and I don't really remember that much about them. There are some scenes that have distinctly stuck in my head that I do think come from book 2, having read the description of book 1, but I'm not going to know for certain until I actually get in there. So the first book in this series is about Rowan. She is an incredibly talented neurosurgeon who is well aware that she has some very strange and interesting talents. She does not, however, know that she comes from a line of witches and doesn't really have anything to do with witches or covens. But then one day Rowan is walking along the beach and she finds a washed up body of a dead man and she somehow brings him back to life. That man is Michael Curry, who has had a very complicated life, but after his very brief stint of death, he discovers that he has some new sensory powers that he can't control and which absolutely terrify him. So from what I understand, the Mayfair Witches, very much like all of Anne Rice's books, are kind of love stories of a sort, which play a lot with the idea of power and the supernatural, and of course Michael has connections to New Orleans, which Anne Rice was absolutely obsessed with. This book is so long, so I'm hoping that the Anne Rice effect happens for me again, because it's always a little bit sad when you revisit authors as like a full-fledged human and the reading experience does not live up. Speaking of reading experiences, which we very much do hope however live up to previous standards, I'm starting 2 new series buddy reads with my patrons over the next couple of months, and the first buddy read is for Paladin's Grace, which is the start of the Paladin series by T. Kingfisher. You guys know that I am absolutely devoted to T. Kingfisher, that I really do honestly think that she can do very little wrong, but I have predominantly read T. Kingfisher's newer works, everything from the Twisted ones onwards, and I have only very briefly dipped my toes into her backlist. And although her new books are predominantly horror and sort of like horrific fairy tale retellings, her previous books have ranged from like fairy tale elements but very much new stories to straight up fantasy romance, which is exactly what this quartet of books are. So I think this series is actually called the Saint of Steel series, not the Paladin series, but either way, the first book, Paladin's Grace, is about Grace. She is a perfumer and she is out one day foraging for ingredients for her perfumes where she is set upon by ruffians. Grace is not exactly a pushover and doesn't really think she needs all that much help, but she is in fact saved in that moment by a literal knight in shining armour. Enter Stephen, who is a failed paladin, somebody who has left in disgrace from the king's court. He spends his time, according to the blurb on the book, knitting socks and working as a bodyguard, and Stephen should be protected at all costs. And Stephen just desperately wants a chance in his life to be useful. So when he and Grace witness an assassination attempt, he decides that maybe this horrific plot that they have stumbled upon is his chance. And the rest of this book is clearly the coming together of them following this. But I am very, very excited for this series. So my patrons and I are going to be tackling one book a month. So that means that this one is on my list. And finally, the only book that I absolutely must read this month, which is probably a good thing because again, the stack is very weighty at this point. Anything else after this next book is just going to kind of be like, if I get to it, if the mood strikes me, if I can. And that book is Gideon the Ninth. Now, you have seen this book a few times before from me on my channel. This was a book that I had bought and it had sat on my shelves for a really, really, really long time until I finally got to the point where I was like, I don't think I'm going to get to this one, and I unhauled it. But not that long after I unhauled it, Becca, who had been in much a similar situation with me in that the book had sat on her shelf for quite a long time before she picked it up, read it and was like, no, this was brilliant and I think you'll love it. And so reluctantly I went out and repurchased myself a copy, and I was all set and excited to start reading when the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown completely took over my brain. But it has consistently been one of the books that has come up again and again and again on my Patreon, and so I was not that shocked when it was the second series to win in our poll, and so I will be reading it. Now, all that I know about this series is that it includes necromancy and a contest, because despite talking about this book several times on my channel before, there is some weird alchemy that happens every time I mention it, which is that the blurb just disappears from my head the second that I think I've got it. So all that I can remember about this one is that Gideon is, I think, a sword for hire who has been brought up by weird murderous nuns, and a bone witch called Harrowhawk who is trying to pass this series of tests in order to keep her house, the ninth house, from dying. She needs Gideon's help. That might be the sketchiest description I've ever given you guys of a book in the entire time that I have had my channel, but we're gonna go with it because that really is all I can remember off the top of my head, and I think now that I'm gonna be reading it for this month, I don't really want to refresh myself any more than that. I think I'm just gonna go into it blind. Alright, so that is it, my friends. Those are all of the books that I'm going to be reading in May, and my little life update, which essentially is that I went from this to like this and now to this. If you have got this far through the video, then please tell me how you're feeling. Either leave me the sun kind of peeking out behind the cloud, or a thundercloud. Like, where are you right now? And also please tell me down below what book you are most excited to read in May. As always, if you have read any of the books on this list and you would like to recommend me some based on them, then please leave that down below in the comments too. Or if you've read some of the books on this list and you absolutely hated them, I would love to hear that too, because opinions live here. If you are new to my channel and you would like to see how I get on with my 800, 900 and plus page tomes this month, then please hit that subscribe button. And if you are one of my returning viewers who were delighted when I popped up in your subscription feed today, then please do hit that like button because it really does help my channel. And I will speak to you guys actually, honestly, really soon. Bye!